Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss 1991's Deceived. Directed by Damian Harris and starring Goldie Hawn, John Hurd, Robin Bartlett, Ashley Peldon, and Tom Irwin. Deceived follows Adrienne, a talented restorative artist that meets the man of her dreams. They marry, have a daughter, and seem to have the perfect life. Unfortunately, happily ever after does not last forever, and once Adrienne's world is shattered, she comes to find that everything she thought she knew was a lie. Deceived is a neo-noir thriller led by Goldie Hawn and John Hurd through a bleak reality of betrayal and survival. The film is well designed, witty, and elevates itself above many of its contemporary counterparts. Deceived is for the horror fan that enjoys strong performances, is up for some chilling suspense, and enjoys a well-crafted 90s thriller. Also joining me tonight is my fabulous co-host, Zena Dixon. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us tonight, and my fellow shirt twinsy horror movie soulmates.
Twinsies.
But we had to show. We just I got this shirt last week and I just loved it. And then when I started, Zena was telling me she had the same shirt. So we're twinsies tonight.
Winning.
But twin, but tonight we are going to talk about one of my favorite 90s thriller movies, Deceived, starring Goldie Hawn. We're going to jump right into it. As always, we're going to do our non-spoiler reviews, and then we'll get to a certain point where spoiler warnings will abound. But I'll just say, jumping right in, this is a movie that I came to because of my mom. She was a big Goldie Hawn fan. There was never a time in our house in my childhood where either Overboard was on, Death Becomes Her, House Sitter, Swing Shift, any Goldie Hawn movie, my mom flocked to it. I don't even know if she was consciously aware of how much she loved Goldie Hawn, but I mean, I must have seen Overboard 1,000 times when I was a kid.
It's so
And
good.
oh, it's such a classic. I mean, all of those, I think, 80s, 90s Goldie Hawn movies are just fantastic, and I love her. She's got that
Mhm.
infectious spirit. And this movie, I remember distinctly, it was like a Sunday night, and it came on at like 9 o'clock on, like ABC, NBC, one of
Mhm.
those channels. But, I think my school bedtime was like 9:30 or 10. So I only got to see like the first 30 or 40 minutes of the movie. And I was like, please, can I stay up, please? And she was like, no,
Mhm.
no. So it was always one of those movies that I wanted to see it again, or like really
Yeah.
see what happened. And I love it. And I think it's such a great performance by Goldie Hawn. It's something different from her. She had done, like Swing Shift, I'd say is more, it's still a comedy at parts, but it's a little bit more drama. But for the most part, Goldie Hawn is known for her comedies. And it
Mhm.
was nice to see her not only in a more dramatic role, but in like a thriller, something you wouldn't quite expect from her. Now, I've read Goldie Hawn's biography, and she said, I don't recall her talking about Deceived, but her career was always based on sort of her being in positions where, like she did Romeo and Juliet, and the way she
Mhm.
performed Juliet was completely different than anybody would have expected or from a more traditional stance. And I think the same thing, she is natural in this movie, but there's something just a little bit more special about it because it's Goldie Hawn. I think it's a
Yeah.
well-crafted thriller. I think it's just the right amount of scary. It plays to those more adult fears. I think, 80s movies, the 80s slasher, I led to the 90s thrillers. I really feel strongly about it. I feel like the demographic of 80s slashers in the early 80s that were in their, late teens were now by the early 90s more adults coming around to
Mhm.
like maybe needing to get a roommate, like in Single White Female, or maybe a
Right.
nanny in The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And this movie too centers on adult fears. It is that idea, which is terrifying, of how well do we really know the person in our life, that special person, or
Right.
just the people in our lives. And I think that that's a really scary concept. And I think this movie handles it well. I think it's well crafted and has a solid finale. contemporary critics at the time, they seem to all love the first like 70 minutes of the movie, the first 70% of it. And a lot of them criticize the ending. And we'll get to the ending when we get to the ending, but I will say that I love the ending. I think that it's very symbolic of the rest of the movie. I think that it's a great sequence, and I think that it all comes together in a way that makes the rest of the cleverness of the rest of the movie, it's like a cherry on top for me. I think it's great. But anyway, Zena, that's how I first came into Deceived. Those are my off the cuff thoughts about it. And just again, we talk about 90s thrillers on this show all the time, and we love them. And this is another one that I think is just one people should definitely see. So, but how did you first come into Deceived, and what are your initial thoughts?
I was late to watching this movie. I probably watched it maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was like available for free on YouTube or either on Tubi. You know how sometimes people will just upload movies?
For
Yeah, I
sure.
mean, they really start to crack down on that. But you know, and I love Goldie Hawn, so I was like really excited to see it. I love a thriller from like 90s. I was all the way in, you know. Plus the poster is just so cool. So when I first checked it out, I fell in love with it. Like you said, I think that it is a very well crafted thriller film. This is my first time actually seeing Goldie Hawn in such a serious role. Like this movie has like a dark, like somber feel to it. And like you said as well, it's just because you literally just said everything I was thinking. As far as it goes with like with the scares, it's like real life scares because who are you laying next to? Who did you marry? And then when you think back on when they first met, it just seemed very calculated. You know what I mean? Like it was just always a plan the whole time. And for someone like her character, Adrienne, she didn't seem like she would really like to put herself out there too often. And when she does, unfortunately, this is what happens. I feel like if you have not seen this movie and you're someone who enjoys 90s, you're someone who enjoys like thrillers, this is definitely for you. And in some ways, maybe I'm wrong, but it's like it's hard to explain. I guess like the whole vibe of the film, it felt very much like a film noir. You know what I mean? Like there's like a dark mystery. And one of the things that I came across when I was just reading up on the movie, just some people felt like it's predictable, you know? And I mean, I think that it depends on who you ask. You know, I think that when I first watched the movie, I kind of suspect that I'm jumping ahead. I kind of suspect a couple of things. But for the most part, I was still engaged. I was still like really wanting to know more. So I don't know if you're like Goldie Hawn, love her in general. So it's just seeing her in this dark kind of role, a more serious role, you know, and then rest in peace, you know, John Hurd, he was just a creepy man in this. So, but yeah, that's pretty much my story with that. So it's either like 3-4 years ago when I first checked this one out.
Yeah, I think that, well, what you said is spot on. I think that it is, you know, I've also seen the criticisms of it being somewhat predictable, but that was sort of, in my opinion, why you watched these movies, especially during that era. I know that people want to, you know, I get it. People say, oh, it's predictable, but that's why you watch this movie. You watch a movie called Deceived. I mean, what were you expecting? You know, like it's that type of movie. You went to watch it for that, and that's why I love it. Not every movie is supposed to be a surprise, but there are and there are surprises within it though that satiate that. You know, I wouldn't say it's line for line. You know what's going to happen, but I also love the sort of neo-noir film aspect to it. You know, that the late 80s, early 90s had that also with, it wasn't all thrillers, but this one, I'm glad you said that because I agree completely that it does have that film noir. You know, it's that neo-noir aspect. Another movie that I really enjoyed from that time is Suspect, starring Cher, and it also has that same quality to it. I feel like the whole movie Suspect is like that, and I feel like in Deceived, the final like 20-30 minutes of it are really like that. And from here on out, everybody, spoilers. I don't think I've spoiled anything yet, but I did mean to say spoilers. I think we both agree we love the movie. What else can we say non-spoiler about it? Now we're going to talk about it. So go and watch it if you haven't seen it. Right. Go watch it if you haven't seen it and come back. But yes, Suspect, the whole movie is neo-noir. This movie, the last 20 minutes, again, and we'll get into the ending, but I do love its certain qualities, like when the big chase starts to happen, and when she runs to the hallway and the way the door kind of shuts as he's running toward it, those are all those qualities. And I like that sort of celebration that some of these 80s, 90s films did. And again, that is to appeal to a more mature audience. The 80s slasher fans are now adults, and these are the movies that sort of offer that to them. I also want to say about, you had mentioned that the tone is kind of somber, or it's interesting to see her in a somber role, because you're right. You know, I'd say the next movie I think she did was Death Becomes Her, and that also has a lot of dark themes, but it's obviously more of a dark comedy, which is still very much Goldie Hawn's, you know, part of her repertoire. This movie, it's very serious, and in that very seriousness, you get to see this other shade of what a great actress Goldie Hawn really is. She does evoke that sort of quality of one who doesn't put herself out there too often, because she fears her, you know, getting bit, and it happened. You know, the world, the second shoe dropped, the floor was dropped out under her, everything, literally too. And yes, I agree that, you know, John Hurd, his character, he was great. I think the interesting thing about John Hurd was, I think he's most known maybe for his role in Home Alone. He does have that sort of everyman, the dad quality, and I think that lends to this sort of sociopathic role that he plays. He was also in a movie I saw like just about last year that I really liked called Cat People, and so I like that it sort of, it shows again what a versatile actor he is, and what a group of great versatile actors and actresses that we had in this film, Deceived, which only makes, you know, I can't say how this movie, how I'd feel about it with a different cast, as far as like the script maybe, or, you know, the more predictable elements, but it doesn't matter that it's predictable, because you have this amazing cast that elevate it to something a little bit more special.
Right. And then on top of that, kind of like what you said, I mean, how can we deny, even if you feel like it's predictable, there's so many twists and turns. And on top of that, it's just a thriller, again, that's really well paced. So it's just like, even like I said, this was probably, I haven't watched it in a while. And it was like, I felt like I was just watching it for the first time, because I wanted to know more. And I agree with you as far as it goes, like with the actors, it's like, I don't know if I can see anyone else in that role, because they, to me, you know, Goldie Hawn, John Hurd, they own those roles. You know, Goldie Hawn, her character is very quiet, and you can, there's like some type of like restraint to her, you know what I mean? And then eventually at this point, with all the stuff that's happening, of course it's going to, you know, that's, forget about the restraints, you know what I mean? And John Hurd, it's literally deceived. He deceived her. Like when he first sees her in the restaurant and she's waiting and she's looking around, it's like, to me, it's like, you went to a really nice restaurant looking for a woman who's kind of well off. And clearly that was his thing. He did it so many times. And, you know, one of my favorite scenes, and this is like jumping ahead, is when they get into an argument about the lingerie and she confronts him about it. And he gets so upset about it, but like, wow, like from an I'm not an actress, but from like an actor standpoint, it's like, again, they own that scene. Like to me, it felt like even with Goldie Hawn, it was like they tried to make her look plain. You know what I mean? Where she's okay, but you can still see her sparkling. You know?
Yeah, it's Goldie Hawn, but I get it. I agree with you. I get what you're saying.
And it's like, okay, I always felt like John Hurd, again, I think that he was a very nice looking guy, great actor. He was such a great actor. But I feel like, you know, I don't know. I think that, you know, she's like really hot, you know? So it's just kind of like, I felt like he should be like, whoa, this is great. But it's because to me, I don't think that she was insecure, but I think that she thought of herself a certain way. You know what I mean? And so I think that with, you know, Jack's character, you know, if that's his name, he's able to pick up on that, because, you know, just seeing when we find out about his past, and it's just disturbing. He even tricked his mom.
Yeah.
So his own mother thought that he was dead. That's horrible. It's just and you know, the thing is too, how I knew, it's like, you know, some people could probably say, well, it's for the money, it's for this, and that's fine. I knew that he was like psychotic for like three major reasons. He did try to kill her, you know. Two, going back to the beginning, he strategized. You know what I mean? Like the whole relationship. You slept with her every single day. You guys lived in the same house for like 5 years. And you had no type of, you were just ready just to disconnect. And he did. Then you also had a child with her.
Mm-hmm.
Do you care anything about the daughter, about his, like, it's crazy. And it seemed like he did not care at all. And he was just lying. It's like he couldn't stop.
It was an addiction to him in the end. Just to refresh for everybody, so you've got, Deceived is about this woman meets this guy, and like you said, the second time around you start to question how much was he planning from the beginning, how much was calculated. But you meet, Goldie Hawn is this restorative artist. She works on different art pieces. He works at like a museum. He's like a collector, buyer sort of guy. Well, they meet. She's on a blind date, but he never shows. But she talks to John Hurt's character, Jack Saunders, aka Frank Sullivan, aka who knows. And they fall in love. It's a world, it happens. All of a sudden, we jump ahead 5 years. They have this cute little daughter. They have this perfect life, and then all of a sudden, we think he dies. We think, she is devastated. Her whole world is crumbled, but she doesn't even know how much it has crumbled because the Social Security office calls, bam, wrong Social Security, finding out not this. She starts becoming a detective. And you're right. I wouldn't say that she's plain, but I think she dims her light a little bit.
Right.
And that's, and I think that goes a long way about people's self-confidence. I think, Goldie Hawn is beautiful, but what really makes her shine is her confidence. And she allows Adrienne to kind of pull back a little and maybe doesn't have the greatest confidence, which is how somebody who, again, yes, John Hurt is a great looking guy, but he's not, an Adonis or anything. And that's how he's able to kind of swoop in and, get with her. So ultimately, she ends up finding he's not who he says he was. He had a completely different life. And what's interesting about it is I like that the cast is a little bit older. At that time, Goldie Hawn would have been, I think, 40, if not in her early 40s, as well as about John Hurt, I think, was about 40 or so. So by the time the movie takes place, I think they're supposed to be in their early 40s. And I like that because you watch this movie the second time around, and there's a lot of stuff that starts to like you have to think the next time through. Wait a minute. Like with that nightgown, when she discovers it and it's a present, and she says to him, "Thank you for this," or some sort of line where he responds, "Well, how do you know I did it for you?" And in the context of the situation, it's sort of like, oh, he did it for himself because he's attracted to her and wants to see it. But when you've watched the movie and you go back a second time, it kind of takes on a different meaning of who says that was for you. That might be for my other wife. And the fact, what I was leading to with them being a little older is that we don't know how many times he's done this. Exactly. He's Jack Saunders now, but he may have been Jack Saunders in his early 20s, but through his late 20s, early 30s, who knows how many lives he's lived. And we get to see that by the end that he's already beginning his new life. It's sort of like the stepfather in that way, where he has this life and it's like about to overlap with his new life. And the pressure that he must be under, I don't have empathy for him, but I can understand like that had to be crazy. And by the end of the movie, his mask is finally starting to come off. And that's what's great about this movie, again, that having such great performers is Goldie Hawn is able to dim down her more known persona and allow Adrienne to grow more confident as the movie goes through, while John Hurt, he's calm and collected, smooth, great, and then the facade starts to crack. Yeah. But again, that's great too. The whole background of this New York life, it does lead to a neo-noir or film noir, neo-noir aspect where it's this sort of dystopian future or contemporary times, but it's usually slightly in the future, but like by a year or two, and just how bleak a reality it is, how, of course, people cheat each other and deceive each other and do all this stuff. But again, because of Goldie Hawn, it allows a different look at this, because you do go in thinking Goldie Hawn, she's going to be optimistic and bubbly, and she's not. And that makes you become within this world, like you're a part of it now. And I just love that about it. And I love that it's the type of movie, because it's so well crafted, well performed, you can watch it a second time and find all these little tiny nuances, such as
Mhm.
that you were talking about his reveal with the nightgown when he was losing it. But even with the nightgown in general, just that little moment where he sort of says, "Who says it's for you?" That means 1,000 different things once you've seen the movie. And I
Yeah.
love movies like that because it does lend itself to making you want to go watch it again and again.
Again, I agree with you on everything that you just said. And I guess I was just going to also just talk about, just with John Hurd, because Goldie Hawn is amazing. Why I felt like John Hurd, his character, his acting was super effective is because he could still be like chilling, but he can also be charming. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
absolutely.
And so it's just like that's what's scary, and how he was just able just to cut that coldness on. Another one of my favorite scenes is when Adrienne, she receives a message from one of her workers, and they're like, "How this woman called and want, or this person called, and they said that they want you to go here, like to his mother's house, like immediately, right?"
Yes,
She
yes.
goes there, she's calling for his mother, and then he's just standing at the doorway like it's nothing.
Spooky, spooky.
Right. And it's just like, I mean, what would you do? What would anyone do? Of course you would be happy. I mean, you'd be shocked, but you'd be happy to see this person, and whatever they're asking you to do, you want to do it. But then, kind of like what you said, when she starts to realize, she starts to put these things together, it goes all the way back to, not just only with the lingerie, but what was the guy's name? Daniel Sherman, who's Daniel Sherman, so thinking back on that stuff. And it's just like a whirlwind. And this person, once again, is not who she thought she was. And I mean, it's beyond him being a scammer. He's a murderer. You know what I mean? He's not, he literally didn't even give you his real name. He has a whole fake background. Who has she been with this whole time? And that's what that's what makes it super creepy, but also I love the way this movie's filmed. You kind of touched on this scene when she's running and like the door closes and we can kind of see him. There's just such a threatening atmosphere like about this whole entire movie. Like when they were falling in love, like you're happy for her, this is beautiful. You think 5 years later they have a beautiful apartment, a beautiful daughter, a beautiful life together. You think that it's happily ever after, but it is not, and that's something that I really just appreciate. And two, I love the fact that they are older, because it's just like this kind of stuff, because we've seen it before with single white female, and she was like in her 20s, maybe early 30s. I think maybe she was in her 20s, right?
Yeah, I think
So
like 27-ish.
yeah, so late 20s, we see that, we've seen it before, so it's just nice that we see them, an older couple in their 40s, and this is what happens. It's beyond what she would fear. Like, okay, not only again he's a scammer, he's a murderer, he's cheated on you, he has other wives, he had many other wives. Who is he?
Yeah.
You don't know. And so another, I'm sorry, I keep on jumping, but another favorite scene of mine, the ending, when she's telling him, well, if you want the necklace, come and get it, type of thing, here it is. To me, that Adrienne was just so powerful. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like at this point, what he needs to be stopped. Like it's getting out of control. What more could she do? It'll be better for him to be dead than for her to even, I mean, eventually I'm sure that she'll tell her daughter this stuff, but it might just be better that he's just no longer around,
Right.
just targeting these innocent women, women, and just like he's just on the prowl. Like who knows? He probably had another wife that we didn't even know about.
Well, I think it's an interesting commentary too. I've never thought about it this way before, so I'm going to spitball off the top of my head. So it might come out clunky, but it does sort of lend itself to because it makes me think of The Stepfather, which I have discussed or written about, and it's the patriarchal society. In a patriarchal society, the norm for being masculine is having these sort of domineering, assertive, sexualized, personas, where the ideal feminine, not in my construct, in a patriarchal
Mm-hmm.
society, the ideal feminine is more passive, submissive, meek, not as sexual, etc. She's there for the man's pleasure. Well,
Mm-hmm.
in this movie, John Hurd's character, I think that lends to his psychosis. I mean, he's a sociopath, but it partially leads to psychosis and the breakdown of the patriarchy and how it makes us all kind of crazy. In the end, he says, and again, we'll go into ending in detail, but he says, I do what I have to do, and I have to do it because he's basically saying, if you want to be academic about it, he's basically saying, I'm a man, and what I'm supposed to do is have a wife, be assertive and aggressive, and be sexual. Well, his assertiveness is, or in being violent too, that's all part of like the ideal masculinity. And he's like, he wants to reject it, but he can't, so it's destroying him. But he's doing everything he's supposed to do. He's hurting the people he loves. He's being sexual by having different families and partners, but he's also having that sort of nuclearized family. And I think that's just an interesting thought. Sorry, I had that off the top of my head. One of the things I love about Adrienne too is actually, I guess, related to that is the sort of twist. She starts off again as the ideal in a patriarchal society. She is a career woman, but it's sort of an acceptable field for women, which would be, again, these aren't my thoughts, patriarchy. But she starts off with, she's in a career that's art. It's a more passive, that's more acceptable for the feminine role. You start off with the happily ever after right ever, which for her is she's achieved perfect femininity. She has a husband, she has a child. And I love that throughout the movie, she has to start to lean on herself. She has to take care of her child. She's the one who whisks the child up when the child has the nightmare and comforts her. And by the end of the movie, I love that she is pissed. She is pissed off. And my favorite moment of the whole film is actually, ironically, a comedic moment. But when she has to go to get that necklace, her daughter's life is on the line. Her life is on the line. She's got too much to deal with in her life right now. And she goes to this fancy pantsy party and to get the necklace back because she had a lot on her plate. She was distracted. She allowed her daughter's friend to take this necklace, which, by the way, saved everybody's life, or at least didn't let him get away with it. So she goes to retrieve the necklace from this like 8-year-old girl. And this girl, you can tell this girl is spoiled and pampered and wants for nothing and can't handle no. She never hears the word no. Well, the dad's giving, so Adrienne comes in, the hostess wife is like, this really isn't a great time. Adrienne's like, I'm sorry, I know, but I got no choice. Comes in, and the dad is all like, hey, you're gonna have to give this back, this necklace. And the daughter's like, it's not fair, it's not fair. And the dad's like, blah, blah, blah. Some people just, they give things away and they take them, and it's a hard reality of life. And Goldie Hawn, Adrienne just kind of bursts in and is like, for Christ's sake, is anybody in charge of here? Grabs the necklace off this teddy bear and is out the door. And I love it because she's finally become pissed. She has finally become like, I'm done with this. I bought into this life. She lived that life, that life with the fancy parties and all that, and realized it was all a joke. It was all nothing. And it leads to her having the strength to succeed in the end. But I love that she's like, no, I'm the one who's going to survive and take care of this child. But ultimately, I like that there's a breakdown of, for the husband, trying to submit to the patriarchal society really breaks him down and cracks him down. Whereas for Adrienne's character, for the woman, it makes her a stronger person when she starts to reject those ideals. And I think ultimately, I love that it pisses her off. At that time, it was sort of the action hero woman of Sigourney Weaver or Linda Hamilton from Terminator 2 and all that. I like that Adrienne's character does the exact same thing, has the exact same thing, but in a reality-based situation, she has that same strength that took her, having to face her fears. And I love that it sort of culminates this. But what do you think about all that? All that, yeah.
I want to comment on that scene that you said is your favorite scene.
It's my
she
favorite.
Goes to the party. Oh my God. That scene is hilarious. I literally laughed out loud. Because I mean, she's not wrong. Like, there's so much, even if all that stuff wasn't happening, but she even said in the beginning, like, I understand, but this necklace is worth a lot of money.
Yes.
And the little girl, like you said, she's so spoiled.
Yeah.
It looks like she's never heard the word no. And, the father, it's just like, it's true. Who is anybody in charge? You know what I mean? Just listen, Unfortunately, hon, we got to take back the necklace.
Yep.
You
Yeah,
know,
and let me just that little girl too. She knew what she was doing when she was sneaking that necklace out of the house. Like, do you think your mommy really will? Oh, can I have this too? She knew what she was
yeah,
doing.
she knew what she was doing. So, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just, she wasn't even looking.
Mm-hmm. She knew.
So, but yeah, that scene is funny. But no, I feel like you said it all. I feel like this is again a really, it's just a fun thriller. It's intriguing. I love watching it. You know, I would even say like if you're like a horror fan, I think that you may enjoy this. I don't want to say you would enjoy it because I'll have some people who I hated it, but like I'll say that you may enjoy it because it is scary. It's a psychological thriller. It's a different type of scary. It's like real life scary. And again, like, you know, if you have a significant other, if you have even like a best friend type of thing, where it's just like I said, he was beyond a scammer. You know,
Yeah.
you can like deal with if somebody's a scammer. If he was cheating on her, okay, fine. But it's like, again, he targeted her and they had like this whirlwind of a romance. And next thing you know, that's not his name. That's not his life. He has more than one wife, and yeah, he also wants to kill you. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's just a lot. It really is. And again, obviously it's 2022, and you know, this movie came out in 1991, and I enjoyed it. I really did.
Yeah, I think it holds up well. Just like you said, it came out in 1991. I think it is a solid choice because it's universal. It applies to both the real and imaginary fears. The first part of the movie, you see the imaginary fears. Goldie Hawn being nervous in a restaurant about meeting a blind date. Goldie Hawn being nervous that her husband's cheating. They're
Mhm.
legitimate fears, but they're not life-threatening fears. And I like that ultimately we lead to this climatic ending where there are real fears. It's for your life. It is the life of your child. It is your own self-preservation. And it culminates in that ending. And I will say that I think the most deplorable thing, the most despicable thing that Frank Sullivan, aka Jack Saunders, does is what he does to his daughter. I think
Mhm.
that the psychological damage that that little girl, who is incredibly adorable, is gonna
Oh,
have to suffer. She first loses her father, and then he appears to her, but first he's like appearing to her in her room in a corner, like a boogeyman type of situation. And
yeah.
she didn't realize that, but one day she's gonna have to think back on those days and realize, oh, that was my creepy dad. And
Yeah.
the fact that he then jolts her out of that reality of loss, or the false reality that he's been killed. He now is saying, oh no, messing up with your concept of life and death, because here I am, this very young girl, what is she going to think? But then the fact that he was like threatening her, but it's horrifying. Anyway, I think that's the most horrifying thing he does. But leading, it all culminates, everything we've discussed, Adrienne's strength.
Mhm.
She finally decides to fight back, and she keeps fighting back. And I love that ultimately it leads to this sort of chase sequence through their home. And again, I
Yeah.
don't know why the contemporary criticism of the time had such a problem with this ending. I think I have a little minor theory that Siskel and Ebert and those types, if you watch or listen to the reviews or read the reviews from horror films from back then, there was such an anger to them. And I believe it was Gene Siskel, the skinnier one,
Mhm.
who, when Friday the 13th came out, he ended up sending like a message or putting Betsy Palmer's address out there, like for people to write how much, like, what a horrifying thing to do. And
Whoa.
what a man thing to do, that you don't realize the harm that you've now put this woman in who just took a job. Get out of here. But anyway, I think it comes down again to these sort of masculine roles. Men will do anything to appear not afraid. And
Mhm.
typically, when people are afraid, especially men, they don't want to act scared. They then turn that into anger. And
Yeah.
I think that that's why the criticisms of this movie, I think that they genuinely got a little scared there at the end of
Mhm.
this movie. It's the chase sequence, and it reminded them of all these chase sequences in these other horror movies of the time. And I think that it triggers for them this sort of knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I hate that ending. Why have that ending? But I think from even an academic standpoint, it's a really smart ending. It takes place in their home, which is already where the whole movie has mostly
Mhm.
taken place. And it's about the breakdown of the home. And what a great situation to see a home that's being torn apart next door that she's running through. It's a labyrinth. It's a literal symbolism of
Hmm.
the maze that she has been running through since she found out that her husband might be not who he said he was. And the fact that it ultimately culminates with her deceiving him. I love that she was deceived.
Yes.
He was always in control, always knew what was going on, but she figured it out, and he even gave her a little bit. And I think that was the first time he really truly loved her or had any respect for her, when she ended up at Daniel Sherman's house. Yeah, that's right. It's
Hmm.
Frank Sullivan, aka Jack Saunders, aka Daniel Sherman, aka who else? Daniel Sherman's wife, when she was there
Hmm.
uncovering it, and he's on the phone. Now that also was a spooky, chilling moment too, when the wife's on the phone and she's like,
Yeah,
yes,
she's
she has
blonde.
blonde hair. Yes, yes. And I love that moment. But I
Yeah.
think that's the first time that he truly respects Adrienne, and he was like, wow, I'm impressed. But other than that, he's had control the whole time. She finally gets to deceive him in the end. And
Yeah.
I just love that. And the last thing I'll say, sorry, is just, I love a good chase sequence. That's my favorite thing. I love a good chase sequence, and it was a good one.
It was. No, but I agree with you on I feel like I keep repeating myself with that, but I do. And I always felt like people, if they didn't like the ending, I'm thinking that they probably felt that she wasn't supposed to be stronger. And it's just like, after everything she's gone through, you know what I mean? It just made a lot of sense that, like you said, she's angry now. And on top of that, not only for what she did to her, but to the daughter, and then like their whole life was fake. I love the fact that this movie has a lot of fake stuff going on: fake social security numbers, fake jewelry, fake names, fake personas, everything. And then even again with that chase sequence, it's just like, that is pretty much when everything is come together, where it's just, she knew, especially when he was like attacking her clearly, or even like he was kind of threatening her on the phone while he had their daughter. He's crazy. Like, this is not who you think that it is. She clearly met his other wife. The other wife is oblivious. You can't even warn her because it sounds crazy, so she has to figure it
Yeah.
out on her own. So I love that, love it so much. And I guess I'll just also just end again, like with the daughter, like you said, it's just kind of like she absolutely loved him, and you can see that. And she's super adorable, which I remember seeing her in a lot of movies around
Yeah,
that time, like
Drop
Drop
Dead
Dead
Fred.
Fred.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, that's all right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's just
Drop
a
Dead Fred.
great movie. But yeah, so it's just like, she's adorable. So it's just like, you see that. And the last time he sees her, but when he's alive, he's like, oh, well, you need to stay with your mom. Like, I'll be back. And it's just like, you have no attachment at all for this little person. And that's what's like crazy about it. But yeah, I loved the ending. It left me very much satisfied. She clearly was ready to move on. And I love the fact that you spoke about with, their home, because that's how I felt. Like, they had like the picture perfect marriage, like you was even saying earlier, she went to those fancy parties wearing the fancy dresses. It's like, it was fake. There's more to life than that. And then on top of that too, even going back to that scene, the fact that that family would even try to give her any type of crap after her husband died is beyond me. You know what I mean? So clearly she was in a rush, but whatever.
That's a good point. I never thought of that. Sorry.
Yeah, like
You're right.
clearly, yeah, it was crazy. Like, where it's just like, listen, if your daughter wants to have a tantrum, let her have a tantrum. Just give the necklace back. And on top of that, you guys have the money to buy her something else. She'll be all right. She'll forget about it like by tomorrow,
Right.
So, but yeah, going back to that scene, like with that, with the apartment next door, the home next door, it's like, it was literally, like you said, like a maze. And I love the fact that she was fighting back because she was angry. And at this point, he realized it's like, okay, she's different clearly from the person who you met, from the person who you thought that you knew, and different from the others. So again, like, Goldie Hawn is just seriously incredible. You see her strength, you see her shine come through. John, heard, like, he just had such a way of being creepy, like we talked about before. Like, there's something chilling about it.
So what are your final thoughts to horror fans and people who might think about watching this movie?
You need to watch this movie.
Yeah.
That's it.
Plain and simple.
Just I feel like we said it all.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about this movie. It's for, fans that enjoy great performances, thrills, 90s thrillers, but 90s thrillers that hold up well. Movie about that. Again, we said a few things that were maybe a little bit under the surface, but it is very entertainment. It's not a particularly academic movie or anything more, but it is clever, it's witty, it's well crafted, and I think that there's a lot to enjoy for anybody that loves a solid 90s thriller. Deceived is maybe the choice for you. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for the Rabid Dog's House. What is your favorite 90s thriller? Are you a fan of Deceived? What's your favorite Goldie Hawn movie? Horror, comedy, drama? What's your favorite? Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us tonight. You can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker, or over at Wicked Horror. And I'm Justin Steele. You can also find me over at Wicked Horror, 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thank you, Zena, for bringing up Deceived when we were talking last time, because I'm so glad we got to talk about Deceived. I love this movie.
Oh my gosh, me too. Thank you again. Like, I just loved rewatching it.
Thanks for being my twin with our t-shirts tonight.
Twinnie!
Twinnies! And thanks everybody for watching. Comment below. Let us know what you think. Have a good one.